Hello everyone. I'm sure many of you already know this, but this video is going to be heavily opinion based from both me and the creators who participated in this video. You can have any opinion you want on how Nintendo promoted Splatoon 3, and that's completely fine. In fact, feel free to share yours in the comments below as well. This video of course has multiple chapters to it, so if you want to go back or to a certain part in the video, feel free to reference yourself using the chapters I put in the video. With that aside, let's continue on with the Splatoon 3 timeline retrospective. On February 17th, 2021, Nintendo showcased yet another Nintendo Direct. Many gaming communities got some awesome announcements that day, but the Splatoon community got arguably the biggest surprise. This was the day the long-awaited Splatoon 3 was announced. After all, it had been a whole 19 months since the Final Fest had finished, and fans couldn't wait much longer. Because this was only a reveal trailer, the contents of this trailer were nothing astounding, mostly just being a showcase of the game's new apocalyptic theme, seeing as Team Chaos won the Final Fest. We got to see the first introduction cutscene to the game with character customization options, and the inkling that would become the main promotional protagonist for trailers to come, as well as some gameplay features, weapons, and specials to analyze. This was all we got, but it was enough to get us pumped. At the end of this trailer, we got a release date for 2022, which was very vague. During this time, there was a lot of speculation on what part of the year the game would release. I personally based my estimations off of the previous gap between the games and went for an early 2022 release, which would have been closer to the gap between Splatoon 1 and 2's time between trailer and release, those being 7 months for Splatoon 2 and 10 months for Splatoon 1. Later on, we would learn that this wouldn't be the case unfortunately, but more on that later. Overall, good reveal trailer to get the community excited. Now post first trailer, we did get a small bit of extra gameplay from the Nintendo Switch OLED trailer, but it wasn't much to get in depth into. It was now the waiting game for a more precise release date and more information about the game. During pretty much all the periods of waiting for news, theory crafting and idea videos for the game would flourish to keep up hype for the long waits, as it would be a whole 7 months after the initial trailer that we would get our second big news drop. That being the return of the Mammalians trailer on September 24th, 2021. This of course was our peek into Splatoon 3's story mode, but also ended up packing a good bit of regular gameplay to analyze too, with some specials, maps, and other small things showcased at the beginning. For the hero mode part of the trailer, we got very fast-paced clips of gameplay, sunken scroll images, and other miscellaneous things, as well as seeing Callie and Marie along with Agent 3. Overall being very similar to the previous hero mode trailers for the previous games, but still having many unique aspects to it compared to the previous ones, ensuring us that it will likely stand out in story and gameplay. The unfortunate part of the trailer is that we got no extra details on the release date. Looking back now, development was likely not at a stage to be sure of a more precise release date in 2022, so it was back to waiting for the community. This time it would be a slightly shorter wait until our next news drop. Before the big news, we got a cool little animation for the new year from the Japanese Twitter. Nothing else, but pretty cool. February 2022 would bring us 2 big news announcements. Before the Salmon Run trailer, Nintendo would open numerous official Splatoon accounts on Twitter for multiple regions, meaning that we had a brand new source of news for Splatoon 3. They would make their first post on the day of the Salmon Run Next Wave trailer, but let's talk about the trailer first. It was released February 9th, 2022. This trailer ended up being the least well received of all the Splatoon 3 trailers to the community, which I personally do agree with, but it still had notable things to go over. We of course got to see one of the new maps, which admittedly is quite basic, at least at the tides shown in the trailer. We get to see some new boss salmonids, as well as the new egg throw mechanic letting us pass to teammates and to the basket. And at the end, we got a mysterious sight of a huge salmonid, which we will talk about later. Overall, it looked like Salmon Run was getting some nice quality of life changes and new enemies. But one of the biggest parts of the trailer would wind up being the reveal of a more precise release date, that being summer 2022. This set most of our expectations for Splatoon 3 to be a game released during summer vacation, which would have been profitable for Nintendo and was a reasonable estimation for the time. This would end up being the first topic for the Splatoon Twitter accounts to announce as well, essentially showing off the same things we saw in the trailer. The Splatoon Twitter accounts would keep posting basic info about the game for new players and revisiting some of the previous trailers of Splatoon 3, all the way till the moment we were waiting for, the release date announcement. On April 22nd, Nintendo finally announced the official release date for Splatoon 3 on all of the Splatoon Twitter accounts, that being the 9th of September 2022, which was almost predicted in advance as Xenoblade ended up getting its release date pushed earlier, which made people assume that Splatoon 3 would take its place for that date, which did end up happening. Still a release date in summer nonetheless, but just barely. And it was not the only thing we got from the announcement. The release date was part of our first look into in-game Turf War gameplay. This gave the community a lot to analyze and take in. As usual, more specials, weapon kits, UI, and all sorts of other features. We sadly didn't get a test fire announcement from this trailer, which would have made sense as Splatoon 2's test fire was 4 months prior to the release, so some people were expecting a possible announcement for that. But either way, this was big news for us and got us excited for what's to come. This is when we entered the Twitter news phase of the wait. On the Splatoon Twitters, we would start getting more in-depth details on what was seen in the Turf War gameplay, such as subs, specials, and weapons. They would also start sprinkling in the infamous brand announcements. They showed off both new and returning brands with some cool renders. They also showed off some music from the in-game groups, and other details. As a side note, during this time they would also start to announce Splatoon 3 promotional hardware, such as the Splatoon 3 OLED Switch, controller, and carrying case. This phase would go on for quite a while, and the closer we got to release date, the more people worried that we wouldn't be receiving a direct or test fire. But finally, on August 8, 2022, the Nintendo and Splatoon Twitter accounts announced a dedicated Splatoon 3 Direct for August 10, 2022. This sent a wave of relief for the community, and many were excited to see if their expectations would be met. The day of the Direct had 60,000 people watching live to see what's in store, and boy did we get a lot. I'm not going to go over all the details for this video, but in a nutshell we got new stages, new weapons, specials, in-depth details on the Splatlands, extra salmon run details, and hero mode, and so many quality of life changes both announced and that the community discovered. And of course, the big reveal of Deep Cut. During their news segment, they also finally announced the Rock Paper Scissors Splatfest World Premiere for August 27th, which was just barely able to make it before the release date. Overall, the reception of the Direct was really good, and likely made a lot of new players interested in the game as well. After the Direct, the Splatoon Twitter accounts started going over all the details we saw in the Direct, and are likely going to keep this up until release. It seems like now is when they're going to start rolling in commercials and ads online and in game stores. So that brings us to today. What conclusion can we bring to the Splatoon 3 timeline? In my opinion, looking back, the initial reveal trailer was a sort of soft announcement. I feel like because of world events and busy game development, Nintendo was likely in a big crunch to try and assure the Splatoon fans that something was in the works, even though they were likely very early in development. You can easily see this with the gap between reveal trailer and release date for each game. Splatoon 1 had a reasonable 10-month gap, while Splatoon 2 got an even shorter 7-month gap. Meanwhile, Splatoon 3 wound up with a 20-month gap between initial trailer and release date. And not to mention the gap between trailers themselves and between Splatoon 2's Final Fest to the reveal trailer. It felt like ages waiting for Splatoon 3 news, especially after the first trailer, which shows how the Splatoon series wasn't the same priority when the Switch first launched, and they wanted big games to come with it like Splatoon 2. It feels like the real announcement for Splatoon 3 were the big news announcements like release date and the Direct. It reminded people, oh yeah, this game exists, as all the early trailers weren't all too interesting for a new player looking in. It just looked like the same old Splatoon gameplay. But the later trailers and Direct would offer a much more in-depth look into all the aspects of the game to get people interested. and being able to give a stream of news every few days on Twitter would also help with the huge empty gaps between trailers, with smaller news and details until the big drop of the Splatoon 3 Direct. I feel like the waiting really took a toll on the community, and the suspense for a Direct announcement raised concerns and started the whole "I'm worried about Splatoon 3" thing. But personally, just by looking back to the previous games, I knew we had to get a Direct at some point, and it actually perfectly matched up with Splatoon 2's Direct being about a month before release. So while waiting was hard, I had faith that we would get the big drop, which we did get. So overall, I can say that Nintendo did the best they could through the constraints. They knew that the wait would be long, so they unfortunately had to settle with big gaps between trailers and use smaller news to keep up to date on Twitter till the big Direct. And as a community, we kept excitement with theory crafting and ideas for the game. And while not all of them came true, it helped us build hype for the game. And while the attention on the game would go up and down over time, the last few months were the crucial be-all end-all for the game in my opinion, and I think they succeeded in making it happen with all the info we received in the Direct. And I think the future looks bright. Aside from a slight new content and future update syndrome in the Direct, on launch we are going to have a lot of new stuff to play with, and I think that this game will indeed be great. Now, while having a single opinion is cool, how does the community feel about this topic? That's why for this section, I brought along some of my favorite content creators to express their thoughts on the topic as well. Those being Chase247, Prochara, and Vicvillon. They are all very amazing Splatoon YouTubers who make amazing content of their own, if you guys didn't know already, so be sure to check them out. Alright, take it away y'all.
So Splatoon 3's timeline from the initial reveal trailer has been pretty interesting, and in my opinion, not very optimal. The first reveal trailer was incredible, but after that reveal, it took so long to hear anything else about the game. The next few trailers were super spaced out, and the Salmon Run trailer we got was honestly not very good. We had to wait another long while before we got the release date trailer, which confirmed that the game would launch on September 9th. After that, we would then proceed to get very tiny updates via the official Splatoon Twitter account. Now here's where I think Nintendo majorly screwed up. All these tiny updates regarding clothing, weapons, and maps could have been made into their own videos. Personally, what I would have done is taken all the news we got via Twitter and convert them into their own Splatoon news roundup videos. If they don't think it's important enough for the main Nintendo channel, they could make a separate Splatoon YouTube channel. The game definitely has enough of a following to get decent traction on these videos. But anyway, all the way up until the Direct, we got these consistent Twitter updates. Now that the Direct has come and gone, I can confidently say that it was worth the wait. We now know pretty much everything, and the game looks great. The Direct showed that the devs had listened to fans' complaints about Splatoon 2, and they made an effort to fix a lot of them. Better training room, improved rank system, a way to get any weapon at a faster rate, inviting people to rooms without being friends. The game just has everything. After the Direct, I would say that my excitement level is at around a 9.5. But just because the Direct was amazing, doesn't let me excuse the fact that the game's marketing cycle before the Direct was pretty abysmal. We had multiple month-long waits in between trailers, and the trailers didn't even tell us that much. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the consistent flow of Twitter updates wasn't very smart. The reason being that not a lot of people were gonna see those. Sure, you could argue that all of those tweets got a ton of likes, but those are mainly Japanese-based. Many North American fans didn't even know about these updates, and I know this because I've heard quite a lot of complaints about it. Again, it would have been better if they just compiled these Twitter updates into short little YouTube videos. Overall, the best way for me to describe the period of time between Splatoon 3's reveal and release would be a big downhill slope, followed by a very fast upwards climb. Everything before the Direct announcement was just getting less and less exciting, but once we did get that Direct, all of our hopes just skyrocketed. I really look forward to playing Splatoon 3.
Hi, I'm Prochara, and it's been a long time since we got our first initial trailer. I didn't have too many expectations from the initial announcement, mostly because there wasn't a lot to see. It was awesome to see Trizuka back and the new movement options, but we just didn't really know enough. As time went on though, I think people's expectations, including my own, got high, and we wanted a better experience than we had in both Splatoon 2 and 1. And that meant a lot of improvements to quality of life changes, new maps, specials, mains, and a bunch of other stuff. Honestly, for the first few trailers, I think they did a pretty mediocre job at promoting the game. Not a lot new was shown off, a lot of players not familiar with Splatoon were confused, and I think especially the Salmon Run trailer really lacked in showing any new substantial content. However, once we got to the release date trailer and they started to drop consistent info, it got a lot better, and I think the Direct absolutely knocked it out of the park. Honestly, a lot of things I thought wouldn't even happen, like a replay mode, better training mode, and just an entirely massive amount of specials ended up happening. So I'd say my expectations are beyond subverted. And even for those who wanted something brand new with the series, I think Table Turf War offers something pretty interesting, and I can't wait to see how that plays out. While I do think Splatoon 3 was announced too early, and it took a bit too long of a time for them to get the ball rolling, once they started to carry it up with the consistent posts, amazing direct, and a few other things, I think they've done an amazing job, and I can't wait for the game to come out.
In February of 2021, we were gifted with the one, the only, the first sneak peek at Splatoon 3. And while we got little bits of information after that, it was relatively quiet from good old Nintendo. People asked, is there more? We had been fed up to that point with a few extra Splatfests by Nintendo to help keep Splatoon 2 alive, but we didn't really see much after that. The real issue here was that we didn't know much about Splatoon 3 besides what we saw, and it was definitely not going to be enough to pull in people who had never been interested in Splatoon in the past. Obviously, any person who was deep into enjoying Splatoon 2 already was going to be getting Splatoon 3. They saw the game and they're like, hey, that looks way better. Why is there a Sam in it? Where are we going? What happened to Pearl Marina? Why is there a train? What is going on? We didn't know anything. And that was really awesome for everybody. So many people were able to make reaction videos, start theorizing, and really get excited for a game that we knew so little about. This year, we finally got way more marketing, which has made people, a lot happier. Around April, we even got our hands on a proper release date, which, we went a whole year without a proper release date, but people still held on to the hope until then that Splatoon 3 was gonna be a summer game. And technically speaking, it is a summer game. It's just, September. Good enough, right? Now we're being jumped with so much marketing. We have weapon kits, we have the test fire, we have Big Man, we have the treehouse giving us information. We're truly winning, and I couldn't be happier. I just hope that it's enough to get people interested in Splatoon 3 that weren't interested in it when it was just Splatoon 1 or Splatoon 2. I think that Nintendo's development team has put in a lot of effort to make movement options more there than ever before, and people might finally see Splatoon for what it is, a third-person shooter that focuses heavily on mobility. That's what makes the game so exciting. If this game was coming out this weekend instead of the premiere, I'd still buy it in a heartbeat.
Again, thank you so much to Chase, Chara, and Vic for coming out here to give some extra variety on the topic. I think we all generally agreed on how the release date started off rough, but picked up later on. And they also gave some cool ideas on how it could have been better and all that good stuff. I'm of course going to link their channels in the description so you can check them out. Silent thank you to all my friends as well for discussing the topic and formulating opinions with me. And thank you for watching the Splatoon 3 Timeline Retrospective. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe and hit the bell to not miss uploads. Check out my other socials in the description, and feel free to leave your thoughts on the topic as well in the comments below. I'd love to read what you have to say. It's been Afu, and I'll see you next time.